Zara's claws scraped against the rough metal floor as she dragged another heavy container across the cargo bay. The sound echoed through the dim space, mixing with the constant hum of the station's life support systems. Sweat dripped from her scaled forehead despite the cool temperature maintained for optimal working conditions. She had been doing this job for 3 cycles now, ever since the elders of her clan decided her fate. The Cathara were a proud species. Their society revolved around family units, bloodlines, and the sacred duty of reproduction. Every adult was expected to contribute to the continuation of their race. Zara had tried for 7 years with 3 different partners, following every ritual, consuming every fertility enhancement their medicine could provide. Nothing worked. The healers ran test after test, but the results were always the same. Her reproductive system was damaged beyond repair, a genetic flaw that made her worthless in the eyes of her people. Defective, the Elder Council had declared. A drain on resources that could be better used for fertile members of society. The exile wasn't immediate. They gave her time to prove her worth in other ways. She tried becoming a scholar, but the libraries were reserved for those who would teach future generations. She attempted to join the warrior caste, but they reminded her that warriors fought to protect families and bloodlines. What was the point of a warrior who would never have anything to protect? So here she was in the lowest levels of orbital station Kepler 442, moving cargo for the various species that passed through this trading hub. It wasn't technically exile since she chose to leave, but everyone knew the truth. She had nowhere else to go. The cargo bay doors hissed open, and Zara looked up to see Captain Reeves entering with his usual confident stride. The human was tall even by his species standards, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He wore the standard-issue uniform of the Terran Colonial Marines, though his sleeves were rolled up and his jacket hung open in a casual manner that would have horrified any Cathara military officer. "Morning, Zara," he said, his voice carrying that strange warmth that humans seem to project so naturally. "Got another shipment for you." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Captain Reeves had been coming to the station regularly for the past 2 months. And he always made a point of talking to her. Not just the brief professional exchanges she had with other clients, but actual conversations. He asked about her day, made jokes, even brought her small gifts from the planets he visited. It was confusing and uncomfortable in ways she couldn't quite understand. "This one's going to the medical bay on level 7, he continued, gesturing to the sealed container his crew was wheeling in. "Nothing too heavy, but it's marked as fragile, so take your time." Zara nodded again and began checking the manifest on her portable scanner. The container was labeled as containing medical research samples from New Hokkaido, a human agricultural colony. As she worked, she became aware that Captain Reeves was still standing there, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "You know," he said finally, "my ship could use someone with your attention to detail. We've got a position open in cargo management." The scanner slipped from Zara's claws and clattered to the floor. She stared at the human in shock. Job offers were rare enough for someone in her position, but an offer from a species as successful as humanity? It was unthinkable. "I appreciate the offer, Captain," she managed to say, "but I don't think your crew would want someone like me." "Someone like you?" His eyebrows drew together in confusion. "You mean someone who works harder than anyone else on this station? Someone who never makes mistakes with manifests or delivery schedules? Someone who actually gives a damn about doing the job right?" Heat rose in Zara's cheeks. She bent to retrieve her scanner, hoping to hide her embarrassment. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "No, I don't know it. Why don't you explain it to me?" The question hung in the air between them. Zara had learned that humans could be direct to the point of rudeness, but there was something different about the way Captain Reeves asked. It wasn't the cruel curiosity she had experienced from some of the other species who had heard her story. It was genuine interest. as if her answer actually mattered to him. "I'm defective," she said quietly, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. "My people cast me out because I can't reproduce. I have no value." Captain Reeves was quiet for a long moment. When she finally looked up at him, his expression had changed completely. The casual friendliness was gone, replaced by something harder and more serious. "That's the biggest load of bullshit I've heard in a long time," he said flatly. Zara's jaw dropped. In all her interactions with other species, none had ever directly contradicted the fundamental beliefs of her culture. They might feel sorry for her or be uncomfortable with the situation, but they accepted it as the way things were. "Excuse me? You heard me. Your people are idiots if they think reproduction is the only thing that gives a person value." He stepped closer, and Zara caught his scent, something clean and warm with an undertone of the ozone that clung to spaceship corridors. "Humans don't work that way. We value people for who they are, not what they can produce." "That's easy for you to say," Zara replied, surprised by the anger creeping into her voice. "Humans are everywhere. Your species is expanding faster than any other in the galaxy. You can afford to be generous." "Is that what you think? That we're generous because we're successful?" Captain Reeves laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, humans have been outcasts and underdogs for most of our history. We know what it's like to be judged as inferior, to have other people decide our worth for us. That's exactly why we don't do it to others." He turned toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "The offer stands, Zara. Think about it. We leave in 3 days." After he left, Zara stood alone in the cargo bay, her mind reeling. She had spent so long accepting her fate that the possibility of something different felt almost frightening. But there had been something in the human's voice, a conviction that made her wonder if maybe, just maybe, her story didn't have to end here. The next 2 days passed in a blur of routine work and racing thoughts. Zara found herself paying attention to the humans who passed through the station, observing their interactions with each other and with other species. What she saw supported Captain Reeves's words. They seemed to judge others by their actions rather than their biological functions or social status. She watched a human engineer spend hours helping a young Zentari fix his ship's navigation system, even though the Zentari had no money to pay for the service. She saw human traders sharing their food with a group of Vorthon refugees who had nothing to offer in return. She observed human diplomats treating elderly Grixian ambassadors with the same respect they showed to powerful military leaders. It was strange and alien, this concept of value based on character rather than function. In Cathara society, everyone had a role determined by their abilities and limitations. The idea that someone could choose their own path, that worth could be self-determined, was almost incomprehensible. On the 3rd day, as Zara was finishing her shift, she heard familiar footsteps approaching the cargo bay. Captain Reeves appeared in the doorway, but this time he wasn't alone. A small group of his crew stood behind him, including his first officer, Lieutenant Chen, and Chief Engineer Martinez. "Time's up, Zara," the captain said. "Have you made your decision?" She looked at the humans, these strange beings who had somehow conquered half the galaxy despite their short lifespans and fragile bodies. They stood there waiting for her answer. And she realized that for the first time in years, someone was giving her a choice that actually mattered. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you want me on your crew? Really?" Lieutenant Chen stepped forward. She was a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes. "Because Marcus told us about your situation, and we think your people are fools. We've been watching you work, talking to other cargo handlers and station personnel. Everyone says the same thing. You're reliable, honest, and hardworking. Those are exactly the qualities we need. Plus," added Chief Martinez with a grin, "Marcus has been talking about you nonstop for weeks. We figured the only way to shut him up was to get you on the crew. Captain Reeves shot his engineer a warning look, but Zara caught the slight redness in his cheeks. The implications of Martinez's comment sent a flutter of something unexpected through her chest. "I don't understand," she said. "I've told you I'm defective. I can never give you children, never continue your bloodline. How can that not matter to you?" Captain Reeves met her eyes steadily. "Because that's not why I want you, Zara. I want you because you're intelligent, capable, and decent. I want you because when you smile, which isn't often enough, it lights up the whole room. I want you because in the past 2 months, talking to you has become the best part of my visits to this station." The cargo bay fell silent, except for the background hum of the station's systems. Zara felt as if the artificial gravity had suddenly failed, leaving her floating in a space where the old rules no longer applied. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am," she whispered. "Good," Captain Reeves said, "because what you are is exactly what we need." That night, Zara stood in her tiny quarters, looking at the few possessions she had accumulated during her time on the station. Everything she owned fit in a single travel bag. It seemed like such a small amount to show for a lifetime, but maybe that meant it would be easier to start over. She thought about her family, her clan, the world she had left behind. They had made their judgment clear. In their eyes, she would always be broken, worthless, a genetic dead end. But here were these humans, offering her not just a job, but the possibility of being valued for who she was rather than what she couldn't do. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unprecedented. As she sealed her bag and prepared to leave the only life she had known for the past 3 cycles, Zara realized she was about to discover what it meant to be chosen rather than cast out. The future stretched before her, uncertain but full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. For the first time since the elders had pronounced their judgment, she felt something that might have been hope. The transport shuttle's engines hummed quietly as they departed from orbital station Kepler 442. Zara pressed her face to the small viewport, watching as the massive structure slowly receded into the star field. She had lived there for 3 years, but now it felt like a distant memory, a chapter of her life that was finally closing. "First time leaving the station?" Lieutenant Chen asked, settling into the seat beside her. Zara nodded. "First time leaving anywhere, really. I spent my whole life on my homeworld until I came to the station." "Well, you're in for a treat. The Endeavor is a beautiful ship, and we've got some amazing destinations coming up." The Endeavor. Zara rolled the name around in her mind. It was a human word, meaning a serious attempt to achieve something difficult. How fitting that she would be joining a crew dedicated to endeavors when her own life felt like the most difficult attempt she had ever made. When they docked with the Terran vessel, Zara was struck by the differences between human and Kithara ship design. Where her people built vessels that were functional and efficient, the Endeavor had an almost organic feel. The corridors curved gently instead of meeting at harsh angles, and the lighting was warm rather than the harsh white illumination she was used to. Captain Reeves met them at the airlock, and Zara noticed he seemed different here, more comfortable and confident than he had appeared on the station. This was his domain, his home, and it showed in the way he moved and spoke. "Welcome aboard the Endeavor," he said, his eyes meeting hers with that same warmth she had come to recognize. "Let me show you to your quarters." Her room was small but comfortable, with a real viewport instead of the holographic displays common on Kithara vessels. The furniture was clearly designed for human proportions, but someone had made adjustments to accommodate her larger frame and different anatomy. A special chair had been installed, and the bed had been modified with proper support for her spinal ridges. "We'll get everything properly fitted once we're underway," Captain Reeves said, noticing her examination of the modifications. Chief Martinez is good with that kind of thing. You didn't have to do this, Zara said quietly. The standard accommodations would have been fine. No, they wouldn't have been. You're part of this crew now, Zara. That means we make sure you're comfortable and able to do your job effectively. The word crew sent another flutter through her chest. She had worked alongside others on the station, but she had never been part of anything. The concept was foreign and appealing in ways she didn't fully understand. Over the next few days, as the Endeavor traveled to their first destination, Zara began to understand what Captain Reeves had meant. The human crew operated like a family unit, but not in the rigid hierarchical way of Cathara clans. They joked with each other, argued about trivial matters, and supported one another through difficulties. Most importantly, they included her in these interactions as naturally as if she had been with them for years. Chief Martinez taught her the ship's cargo management systems, which were far more sophisticated than anything she had used on the station. The technology was impressive, but what struck her more was the way he explained things. He never made her feel stupid for not knowing something, and he seemed genuinely pleased when she mastered a new skill. "You've got a natural talent for this," he said, as she successfully coordinated a complex loading sequence. "Most people take weeks to get the hang of the multi-bay synchronization." "I had good teachers," Zara replied, then surprised herself by adding, "and I like the work." It was true. For the first time in her life, she was doing something that felt meaningful rather than just necessary for survival. The cargo she managed wasn't just boxes to be moved from one place to another. It was supplies for colonies, medical equipment for hospitals, food for relief efforts. Her work mattered, and people appreciated it. Lieutenant Chen became another unexpected source of friendship. The older woman had a dry sense of humor and a practical approach to problems that reminded Zara of the best aspects of Cathara thinking. During their off-duty hours, Chen would often invite Zara to join her in the ship's common area for meals or conversation. "Tell me about your homeworld," Chen said one evening as they shared a meal that combined human and Cathara cuisines. "What was it like growing up there?" Zara found herself describing the crystal cities of Cathara Prime, the massive family compounds where multiple generations lived together, the elaborate ceremonies that marked every major life transition. As she spoke, she realized how much she missed certain aspects of her home, even as she appreciated the freedom she had found among the humans. "It sounds beautiful," Chen said when she finished, "but also very rigid." It was. Everyone knew exactly what was expected of them, what role they would play. It made life predictable, but it also meant there was no room for deviation. Deviation like not being able to have children? Zara nodded. "Among my people, that's not just a personal disappointment. It's a fundamental failure of purpose. Like a computer that can't process data or a ship that can't travel faster than light. What's the point of keeping it around?" Chen was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward with a serious expression. "Can I tell you something about humans, Zara? Something that might help you understand why we're different?" "Please." "We're a relatively new species on the galactic stage. When we first made contact with other civilizations, we were considered primitive and chaotic. The established powers looked down on us because we didn't fit their models of how an advanced society should function. We were too diverse, too unpredictable, too willing to change." Chen paused to take a sip of her tea before continuing. "But that chaos, that willingness to deviate from expected patterns, turned out to be our greatest strength. While other species optimized themselves for specific roles and environments, we learned to adapt to anything. We survived and thrived precisely because we refused to accept that any individual was worthless." The words resonated with something deep inside Zara. She had spent so long thinking of her inability to reproduce as a fatal flaw, but what if it was simply a difference? What if her value lay in other areas that her people had never thought to explore? As the weeks passed, Zara's relationship with the crew deepened, but her connection with Captain Reeves became something else entirely. He sought out her opinions on decisions large and small, included her in planning sessions that went far beyond cargo management, and shared stories of his past that revealed depths she hadn't suspected. She learned that he had grown up in poverty on a frontier colony, that he had lost his parents to a plague when he was barely an adult, that he had worked his way up through the ranks of the colonial Marines through sheer determination and skill. His success hadn't been handed to him because of his bloodline or his reproductive potential. He had earned every promotion, every command. "Sometimes I think the best thing about humanity is that we're all damaged in some way," he told her one evening as they stood together on the observation deck, watching stars stream past in hyperspace. "We understand that perfection is an illusion, and that real strength comes from learning to work with our flaws rather than hiding from them." "Is that what you think I'm doing? Working with my flaws?" He turned to look at her, and the intensity of his gaze made her pulse quicken. "I think you're discovering that what your people called a flaw might actually be a gift." "How can infertility be a gift?" "Because it forced you to find your worth in other ways. Because it brought you to us. Because it made you the person you are right now, in this moment." The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. Zara had never experienced anything like the emotions she felt when she was near Captain Reeves. Among her people, relationships were practical arrangements designed to produce offspring. Love, as humans understood it, was a foreign concept. But standing there in the soft light of the observation deck, feeling the warmth of his presence and seeing something in his eyes that she was beginning to recognize as affection, she thought she might be starting to understand what the poets and philosophers of various species had been writing about for millennia. "Marcus," she said, using his first name for the first time outside of formal crew meetings. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm afraid. Not of the work, or the travel, or even of being away from my people. I'm afraid of this, of whatever is happening between us. I don't know how to be what you might want me to be." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Zara, I don't want you to be anything other than exactly what you are. I'm not looking for a perfect partner or someone to fulfill a specific role. I'm looking for someone to share experiences with, someone who challenges me and makes me want to be better. But I can never give you children. I can never be part of continuing your family line." Marcus reached out and gently touched her scaled cheek. The contact sent electric shocks through her entire nervous system. "Do you think that matters to me? Do you think I've been courting you for months because I see you as a breeding partner?" The blunt question startled a laugh out of her. "When you put it like that, it does sound rather insulting." "Good, because it should. Zara, I care about you because of who you are, not what you can produce. I care about your intelligence, your work ethic, your dry sense of humor, the way you scrunch up your nose when you're concentrating on a difficult problem. I care about the person I see when you think no one is watching, the one who's kind and generous despite everything you've been through." Tears began to form in Zara's eyes, a physiological response that was the same across many species, even if the emotional triggers were different. "I don't understand how you can want someone like me." "Then let me show you," he said softly. "Let me prove that your worth isn't determined by anyone else's standards." As he leaned in to kiss her, Zara realized that she was about to cross a line she had never imagined approaching. She was about to discover what it meant to be chosen not for her utility or her potential offspring, but for herself. The future suddenly seemed bright with possibilities she had never dared to imagine, and for the first time in her adult life, she felt truly valued. When their lips met, She understood that sometimes the greatest adventures began not with dramatic departures or grand gestures, but with the simple decision to believe that you deserved to be loved exactly as you were. 6 months had passed since Zara joined the crew of the Endeavour, and she could barely recognize the broken creature who had once dragged cargo across the floors of orbital station Kepler 442. The woman who stood in the ship's communications center, coordinating a complex three-way supply run between human colonies, bore little resemblance to the outcast who had accepted her exile as inevitable. "Cargo manifest confirmed for New Geneva," she reported to Marcus, who stood at the center console monitoring their approach to the planet. "Medical supplies and agricultural equipment loaded in Bay 3, manufactured goods for the outer settlements in Bay 2. "Excellent work, as always," he replied, but his smile carried a warmth that went far beyond professional appreciation. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the months, deepening from mutual attraction to something that Zara was learning to call love. It was unlike anything described in Kithara literature or culture. There were no negotiations between family clans. No genetic compatibility assessments, no formal contracts outlining reproductive expectations. Instead, there was simply the growing certainty that they belonged together. Marcus had kept his word about showing her worth through actions rather than words. He had promoted her to senior cargo coordinator within 3 months, putting her in charge of logistics for their entire operation. When she expressed interest in learning other ship systems, he arranged for cross-training with every department. Chief Martinez taught her basic engineering, Lieutenant Chen shared navigation techniques, and the medical officer, Dr. Park, introduced her to xenobiology and emergency medicine. "You're turning into quite the Renaissance woman," Dr. Park had joked after Zara successfully assisted with a difficult surgery on a wounded colonist. "Is there anything you can't do?" The question had made Zara pause. For so long, she had defined herself by the one thing she couldn't do. Now, surrounded by people who valued her capabilities rather than lamenting her limitations, she was discovering talents she never knew she possessed. But it wasn't until they received the distress call from Kithara Prime that Zara truly understood how much she had changed. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kithara homeworld," Communications Officer Roberts reported. "It's on official government channels." Marcus looked at Zara with concern. "Do you want to take this in private?" She shook her head. "Whatever they have to say, I want the crew to hear it too." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Elder Korvac, the same official who had overseen Zara's original classification as defective. His ceremonial robes and formal bearing seemed almost absurd now, theatrical in a way that Zara had never noticed when she was part of that world. "This message is directed to the one called Zara Thekhai, formerly of the Mist Valley clan," Elder Korvac intoned. "You are hereby summoned to return to Kithara Prime to fulfill your obligation to your people." Zara felt the crew around her tense, but she remained calm. "I have no obligations to people who cast me out, Elder. State your business or end this transmission." Elder Korvac's eyes widened at her directness. In the old days, she would never have dared speak to him in such a tone. "The situation has changed," he said stiffly. "Recent events have created circumstances that require your unique perspective. A plague has affected our population's fertility rates. Many who were previously fertile can no longer reproduce. Your experience with this condition makes you valuable." Zara almost laughed at the bitter irony. "So now that others share my defect, suddenly I have value? How convenient. Do not mock the suffering of your people, Zara Thekhai. This plague threatens our very survival. Those who cannot bear children are being consulted on how to maintain purpose and contribute to society in other ways. Your insights could help preserve our civilization." Marcus stepped closer to Zara, his presence offering silent support. She could feel the protective anger radiating from him and the rest of the crew, but she also sensed their trust in her ability to handle this situation. "My insights?" Zara repeated. "Very well, Elder. Here is my insight. Your civilization deserves to fail if it can only find value in its members when forced to by circumstance." Elder Korvac's face darkened. "You would condemn your entire species out of petty spite?" "I would condemn a system that sees people as valuable only for their biological functions," Zara replied firmly. "You taught me that I had no worth because I couldn't reproduce. Well, I learned you were wrong. I have worth because of my intelligence, my skills, my character, and my capacity to contribute in meaningful ways. If your people are suffering now, it's because you never bothered to recognize the potential in anyone who didn't fit your narrow definitions." She paused, feeling the weight of years of pain and rejection flowing out of her. "But I'll give you the same advice the humans gave me. Stop defining people by what they can't do and start recognizing what they can do. Stop treating reproduction as the only measure of value and start building a society where everyone can contribute according to their abilities. Stop being so concerned with bloodlines and genetics that you forget the importance of compassion, innovation, and individual choice." Elder Korvac was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its authority. "You have changed, Zara Thekai. This is not the broken creature who left our world." "No," she agreed. "I'm not broken anymore. But I was never broken to begin with. I was just living in a broken system." After the transmission ended, the bridge remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Chief Martinez spoke up. "Damn, Zara, that was beautiful. I wish I could have seen that pompous bastard's face when you told him his whole civilization was wrong." Dr. Park nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think they'll actually listen to your advice?" Zara shrugged. "Some might. Change is hard, especially for a culture as rigid as ours, but maybe this crisis will force them to question their assumptions the way mine was questioned." Marcus moved to her side and took her hand. "Are you all right? That couldn't have been easy." "It was easier than I expected," she admitted. "A year ago, hearing from them would have destroyed me. I would have felt obligated to return, to try to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. Now," she looked around at the crew, these humans who had become her family. "Now I know where I belong." Lieutenant Chen smiled. "With us stubborn, chaotic humans who don't know the proper way to run a civilization? With people who judge others by their actions rather than their biology," Zara corrected. "With people who believe that every individual has value and potential. With people who choose love over convenience and character over genetics." Over the following weeks, as news of the Cathara fertility plague spread throughout the galaxy, Zara found herself in an unexpected position. Other species began reaching out, asking for her perspective on how to maintain social cohesion when traditional roles were disrupted. She became something of an expert on adaptation and resilience, sharing the lessons she had learned from humanity. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been cast out for being unable to reproduce, but now she was helping to birth new ideas and perspectives that could reshape entire civilizations. "You've started something," Marcus told her one evening as they reviewed requests for consultation from 3 different planetary governments. "You're changing how people think about value and purpose." "We've started something," she corrected. "This began when you and your crew decided that a broken Cathara cargo handler was worth taking a chance on." He pulled her close, and she marveled again at how perfectly she fit in his arms, despite their different species and physiology. "You were never broken, Zara. You were just in the wrong place." A year later, Zara stood before the Galactic Council as a special advisor on social adaptation and individual rights. The chamber was filled with representatives from dozens of species, many of whom were grappling with changing demographics and evolving social needs. The question is not how to maintain traditional structures in the face of change, she told the assembly. The question is how to create structures that value every individual regardless of whether they fit traditional molds. The humans understood this long before they reached the stars. They built their civilization on the principle that worth comes from character and contribution, not from biological function or social position. As she spoke, she could see Marcus in the gallery, his face glowing with pride. Beside him sat the rest of the Endeavor crew, her chosen family who had shown her what it meant to be valued for who she was rather than what she could produce. Change is difficult, she continued, but it's also an opportunity. An opportunity to build something better, something more inclusive, something that recognizes the potential in every individual. The choice is yours. Adapt and grow stronger, or cling to outdated systems and watch your civilization stagnate. The applause was thunderous, but what mattered more to Zara were the faces in the crowd. She saw hope in the eyes of representatives from species struggling with their own versions of rigid social hierarchies. She saw understanding dawning in the expressions of leaders who had never questioned their assumptions about value and purpose. Later, at the reception following her address, she was approached by a young Cathara diplomat named Tai. Unlike the formal robes and ceremonial bearing she remembered from her homeworld, this woman dressed in simple, practical clothes and carried herself with quiet confidence. "Zara Thek Hai," Tai said, offering the traditional Cathara greeting. "I wanted to thank you for what you said today." "What brings you so far from Cathara Prime?" Zara asked. Tai's smile was sad, but determined. "The same thing that brought you here, I suspect. I was cast out 6 months ago. My crime was questioning why fertile individuals were automatically given positions of authority while those who couldn't reproduce were relegated to menial labor. And now? Now I serve as a cultural liaison, helping other Cathara who have been cast out find new homes and purposes. Your example showed us that exile doesn't have to be the end of our stories." As the evening progressed, Zara met others like Tai. Outcasts and misfits from various species who had found new purposes and new homes, among peoples who valued their unique perspectives. Each story reinforced the lesson she had learned aboard the Endeavor, that sometimes being cast out was actually the first step toward finding where you truly belonged. When the formal events ended, Zara and Marcus walked together through the council station's observation galleries, looking out at the stars that held countless worlds and infinite possibilities. "Any regrets?" he asked. Zara thought about her homeworld, about the family and clan she had left behind, about the life she might have had if she had been born different. Then she thought about the crew who had become her family, the work that gave her purpose, and the love that had transformed her understanding of her own worth. "Only one," she said finally. Marcus's expression grew concerned. "What's that?" "I regret that it took me so long to realize that being cast out was actually being set free." He laughed and pulled her close. "Well, you figured it out eventually. That's what matters." As they stood together watching the stars, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her from the cargo bays of a space station to the halls of galactic government. She had been cast out for her infertility, branded as defective and worthless. But the humans had seen something else entirely. They had seen potential, character, and worth that transcended biological function. In choosing her despite her supposed flaws, they had given her something her own people never could: the chance to choose herself, to define her own value, and to build a life based on love rather than obligation. The future stretched ahead of them, bright with possibilities and rich with the promise of continued growth and discovery. Zara had learned that sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the form of apparent disasters, and that true strength lay not in fitting predetermined roles, but in creating new ones. She had been cast out for her infertility, but in the end, she had birthed something far more valuable than children. She had helped birth new ways of thinking, new possibilities for countless individuals across the galaxy, and a new understanding of what it meant to have worth. And at her side stood the human who had started it all by seeing value where others saw only defects, offering choice where others offered only judgment, and providing love where others offered only conditional acceptance. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most beautiful futures grew from the most unlikely beginnings. Cut.